In the autumn of 1929, the American economy unraveled. Banks closed their doors, businesses folded overnight, and unemployment swept across the country like a silent epidemic. The gears of commerce ground to a halt, and millions of families found themselves staring down a terrifying truth. The financial system that they had trusted was no longer there. But money disappearing was just one aspect of it. It's about something far deeper: the human instinct to adapt, to reach for others, and to survive in the absence of everything we once counted on. As dollars lost their meaning and coins lost their power, people discovered something extraordinary. They built new systems, they created new definitions of value, and most importantly, they leaned on each other. This is the story of how America survived when money failed. A story of invisible economies, emotional wealth, and the fierce resilience of community. A story where hope wasn't just an idea, it was the currency that kept people alive. So let's begin. Shocking economic reality. Before we get into the meat of this video, let's look at some numbers to understand the reality of that time. During the Great Depression, the U.S. unemployment rate rose dramatically from 3.2% in 1929 to a peak of about 25% in 1933, representing roughly 15 million unemployed people at the time. Unemployment remained in double digits through the 1930s and only began to decline significantly with the onset of World War II, reaching about 9.9% in 1941 and dropping further to 4.7% in 1942. This prolonged high unemployment was largely due to a collapse in demand, causing many firms to reduce their workforce or close entirely. All this contributed to the economic downfall of families that we are going to discuss now. The psychological economy. The Great Depression shattered the collective sense of certainty that people had about their futures. For generations, people believed that America was a place of true opportunity and that financial institutions always had their back. This is what the American dream was originally all about: securing a good life by working hard, not for yourself, but for the entire community. But when banks collapsed, taking the whole economy down with them, that belief in the American dream also crashed hard. Money, in the traditional sense, became a ghost. In many towns, there was simply no currency in circulation. People had nothing to spend, and even those with a few dollars found that it didn't guarantee access to food or shelter. The failure of the economy was becoming more emotional than merely fiscal. It left people feeling powerless and unanchored. But as human beings, we need to define value to keep society functioning. In the absence of formal money, value had to be redefined from the ground up. Trust, once a social nicety, became a survival tool. Human relationships replaced credit. Empathy replaced cash flow. Instead of relying on systems, people began relying on each other. This psychological shift was enormous. It demanded that people not only adapt how they worked, but how they saw each other. Alternative economic systems. Across the country, as formal institutions faltered, communities responded by creating their own systems of trade and cooperation. These weren't economic theories made by armchair philosophers. They were lived realities, and they functioned without the dollar. In rural towns and urban neighborhoods alike, people began trading skills instead of money. A man who could mend boots might fix shoes for his neighbor, who would repay the favor by delivering vegetables from her garden. Carpenters offered repairs in exchange for milk. Teachers provided lessons to children in return for bread. These exchanges weren't always equal in value on paper, but they were grounded in mutual need and respect. In some regions, entire labor exchanges emerged. Communities organized work groups where people took turns helping one another harvest crops, build barns, or repair roofs. No one received wages, but everyone benefited. These arrangements were all relational. They were built on character and a shared understanding that survival was a collective responsibility now. Trust became the backbone of these systems. A person's word, their reliability, and their reputation became more powerful than any bank account. And as these exchanges happened face to face, often among neighbors or extended kin, there was accountability and dignity in every transaction. In some places, informal credit systems also appeared. A local shopkeeper might allow families to buy now, pay later, not because they were confident of repayment, but because they believed in the people they served. In these moments, charity and economy became indistinguishable. Local communities also came up with currencies of their own to deal in goods. These were known as scrip. This improvised currency was issued by local governments, businesses, or relief agencies. Scrip came in the form of paper notes, tokens, or checks and was used to pay workers or buy essentials at participating stores.
Hi YouTubers, today we're going to talk about Depression scrip.
It wasn't backed by gold or the federal government, but only by trust that others would accept it. In many towns, scrip became the glue that kept local economies alive, a reminder that even without formal money, people could create systems that sustained each other. Unexpected survival mechanisms. While much of this economy took place off the books, it was far from invisible to the people living through it. In fact, for many, these systems of exchange and mutual aid were more tangible than any policy coming out of Washington. Neighborhoods, particularly in working-class districts, began to form what can only be called underground survival networks. These were loose, spontaneous webs of cooperation that grew naturally as needs became apparent. People who might not have spoken much before the crash now shared tools, traded clothing, or watched each other's children. Entire communities began pooling resources in order to survive. One household might have a chicken that still laid eggs. Another might have a small plot of land for vegetables. Another might have a sewing machine. Separately, these assets were limited, but together they formed a miniature ecosystem. And these small, informal economies often function more reliably than anything managed by the state. Bartering was back in the modern economy in a true but unexpected form. Even the act of cooking took a communal form. In many places, families prepared meals together. These shared meals offered both communal relief and nourishment. Dignity remained a central value throughout this time. Even when people had nothing material to give, they gave of themselves. A neighbor might offer to help chop wood for an elderly couple. A mother might take in a friend's children for the day so she could seek work. Some exchanges were not tracked on some ledger, but they were always remembered. In those memories, a new kind of value was being created. One of the most powerful aspects of this time was how people used emotional strength to survive. Most things no longer made sense and uncertainty was everywhere. There was no choice but to be emotionally resilient if you had to survive. In many towns, groups of jobless men came together, not just to vent, but to find answers. They asked questions like, can we build a new irrigation ditch? Or can we share gas to get someone to a job? These talks scratched their existential itch and also turned hope into some concrete action. Taking care of kids also became a shared effort. One mother might watch a group of children, while others looked for work or waited in long food lines. No one needed to ask, it was just something people did, knowing they might need help too. Even emotional support became something people gave and received. They told funny stories to lift each other's spirits and gathered in the evenings to feel close to others. When everything else was falling apart, that sense of community was the one thing people could rely on. At the heart of it all was hope, but not in some wishful or rosy sense, but in a rigid and strong sense. The kind of hope that gets things done and that allows you to create something out of nothing. Over time, the survival networks of the Depression became the foundation for broader community institutions, credit unions, food co-ops, worker collectives, and mutual aid societies. These weren't born out of someone's whims or accidents. These were evolutions of systems born during the hardest years of the 20th century. Psychological research insights. Modern psychology has only recently begun to articulate what Depression-era survivors understood intuitively. That emotional and social capital are just as important as material capital in times of crisis. Studies show that human connection is the single most important factor in long-term psychological resilience. That creative problem solving, the ability to adapt old tools for new challenges, is often more effective than technical expertise. That community belonging acts as a buffer against mental breakdown, and emotional intelligence, the ability to read a room, offer comfort, or inspire trust, can change the course of a life, especially when everything else has failed. They form the unseen infrastructure that allowed people to endure. The Great Depression revealed that money doesn't hold us together, people do. Hope was a strategy for survival, and in uncertain times, it still is. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories of American endurance. Thanks for watching. Until next time.